alien fleet hung above the planet like a dark ceiling stretching across the sky their ships, blocking the sunlight and casting long shadows over what remained of Earth, the Yulkari. Commanders expected chaos, noise, and desperate last stands. But instead, they saw something they had not prepared for silence the great cities that once shone with lights and movement were. Now hollow shells, broken buildings stood like the bones of giant streets lay empty. No smoke, no fire, just stillness. The wind moved through shattered windows carrying only dust. And the faint echo of a world that once lived, the Yulkari thought this was surrender. They believed humanity had finally broken. After years of relentless war, they had burned the forests, poisoned the seas, and shattered the defense lines. It crushed every human fleet in space and destroyed every orbital station. But now, as they floated in orbit, scanning for resistance, they found no active armies, no open communication, no heat. Signatures of large gatherings. It looked as if Earth had given up yet. Deep underground, far from the view of the alien eyes, a small, dimly lit room flickered with weak light. Its walls were cracked from past bombardments. Wires hung loosely from the ceiling, and dust coated the old metal consoles. In the center sat a woman in a torn and dirt-covered uniform, her hair tied back hastily, her eyes bloodshot but sharp. Captain Alina Rhodes had been missing since the fall of the European defense line. Many had assumed she was dead, but she had survived, moving through the ruins, avoiding alien patrols, and finally finding this abandoned transmission bunker. It was not much, just a collection of ancient signal equipment, patched together with whatever she could find, but it had one thing no other place on Earth did. It had a direct line to every major frequency the Yulkari used to monitor human broadcasts. She sat there quietly, her fingers running over the old controls as if waking a sleeping beast. Dust lifted into the air as the machines hummed to life. The sound was strange, almost too loud in the silence of the underground chamber. She adjusted the microphone, its metal cold under her touch. Her hands trembled not from fear, but from the weight of what she was about to do. She looked at the small clock on the wall, its glass cracked, but still ticking. Each second felt heavier than the last. Above her, miles of rock and debris hid her from the enemy, but she knew they were listening. They always were. Every time the humans had tried to speak to the Yulkari, they had answered with violence. Today, she was not asking for peace. She was not asking for mercy. She was sending something else entirely. High above the planet, aboard the largest Yulkari command ship, sensors detected an unexpected signal. It was faint at first, like a whisper lost in static, but it grew stronger, pulling the attention of the alien commanders. They shared quick glances, assuming this must be the human. Surrender finally, after so many years, a desperate plea to end the suffering. They opened the channel with calm arrogance, prepared to hear. Begging instead, the speakers on their bridge crackled, and a voice cut through, steady and cold, to the Yulkari. Empire, this is Earth's final broadcast. The words froze the room for a second. The tone was not defeated, it was not desperate. It was something else, something heavy, something alive. The voice carried no trace of fear, and for the first time in this long war, the Yulkari felt something they had never felt from humans before. Not hatred, not anger, but certainty. The commander leaned forward, narrowing his eyes as the voice continued, but then the signal shifted. There were no words, only sound. At first it was a faint rhythmic beat, slow, deliberate. The aliens glanced at one another, unsure if this was some form of human code. The beat grew louder, like footsteps, then it became something deeper, a roar mixed with distant thunder, the sound of drums, weapons, and shouts. Some of the alien bridge, the crew listened, trying to decipher its meaning, but down in the underground bunker, Alina's eyes never left the glowing console. She knew the Yulkari were hearing it. She knew they were imagining it, trying to understand, but they would not understand yet. This was just the beginning. She had hours of recordings ready, not just one battle, not just one war, but every moment in human history, when people had stood against impossible odds. Her finger hovered over the next switch, her breathing slow and steady. Soon they would see, soon they would remember that humans were not born in peace. They were forged in fire, and they had carried that fire into the stars. And if the Yulkari thought that silence of Earth was surrender, they were about to learn it was something far worse. It was the warning before the storm, Captain. Alina Rhodes sat in the dim bunker, her face half hidden in shadow, as the old signal boards glowed weakly in front of her. The low hum of the machines filled the room like the sound of a heartbeat. She could hear the faint rumble of alien ships above. Even through miles of rock, the war had stripped her of everything. Her family, her home, her command, but not her voice. That was the one weapon she still had in her hands, and today she would aim it directly at the Yulkari. She leaned closer to the microphone, its surface cold against her lips. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind for days, each word chosen. Each pause deliberate. There would be no second chance. Her voice had to cut through their arrogance like a blade up. In the orbiting Yulkari flagship, the crew waited for more human words. The commander sat with his scaled hands resting on the armrests of his chair, expecting pleading, perhaps. Formal declaration of surrender. Instead, the voice returned smooth and unwavering. "You came to our world thinking you knew war," the voice said. "But you have not yet met its true face." The bridge fell. Silent, every alien I fixed on the speakers. The translator converted her English into the harsh tones of their language, yet even in translation, her tone carried something dangerous. Sound changed again. It was no longer just a beat, now it was a wall of noise, thunder rolling into the clash of metal, and the sharp crack of gunfire. The aliens tilted their heads as strange human voices shouted orders in languages they had never heard before. The recordings shifted rapidly, the cries of warriors charging on horseback, the ring of steel, the roar of cannon fire, the whine of jet engines screaming overhead. It was chaos, yet there was rhythm to it, like a storm with a heartbeat. These were not simulations. These were real moments drawn from centuries of human battle, raw and unfiltered. On the bridge, one of the younger Yulkari officers frowned, his mandibles twitching in unease. "What is this?" he asked. "It is human history." Another answered, "Battles from long before they reached the stars." The commander studied the sound closely. Each noise, each shout, each explosion told him something unsettling. These creatures had fought more wars than the Asaya Empire had recorded in its entire existence, and they had done it on their own world without alien weapons or fleets. Back in the bunker, Alina's fingers danced over the controls. She switched between archives, drawing from every century, every kind of fight she could find. She wanted the Yulkari to see humans not as the scattered survivors they saw in the present, but as the species that had always risen when cornered. She remembered the fall of New London, how she had watched entire streets hold their ground against alien tanks using nothing but rifles and homemade explosives. The Yulkari had taken the city, but they had paid for every meter in blood. She leaned into the microphone again, her voice calm but laced with steel. "This is what we are," she said. "Not soldiers, not civilians, but a people who do not stop. You can burn our cities and kill our fleets, but you will never kill this." And with that, she sent the next wave of recordings through the signal. It's not just sounds this time, but video compressed and patched through every alien receiver available. The screens aboard the Yulkari ships flickered to life, showing endless lines of human soldiers marching through mud, standing in trenches, holding burning barricades against overwhelming odds. Some faces were young, others old, but all had the same fire in their eyes. The Yulkari crew watched in silence, the arrogance in their expressions fading into something else, a quiet tension. They were beginning to understand this was not a surrender, this was a warning, and Captain Alina Rhodes knew she had their attention. The first step was complete, but the real message had only just begun. The signal continued to flood the alien ship's systems, filling every screen with images they could hardly believe. The Yulkari commanders watched as ancient battles unfolded before their eyes. Foot soldiers charging with spears, armored knights clashing swords, lines of musketeers firing volleys, and tanks rolling across muddy fields. Each scene was brutal and raw, not polished or glorified. It was real war, the kind where people fought and died for survival, for home, for something deeper than conquest. Confused murmurs ran through the alien bridge. One officer hissed, "Why show us this? What is their purpose?" The commander's eyes narrowed as he studied the images. These humans were not afraid to show pain or loss. The footage revealed a history of endless struggle, civil wars, invasions, revolutions, all played out with desperate courage. Suddenly the footage changed. The sound shifted from distant gunfire to the roar of jet engines and explosions in the skies. The aliens saw humans piloting crude aircraft, dodging enemy fire, crashing and rising again. They saw soldiers running through ruined cities, face grim and unyielding, fighting back even when surrounded, down in the bunker. Alina's hands hovered over the controls as she sent more clips. Her voice returned, steady and commanding. See now, the spirit you face? Humans are not born from peace. They're forged in fire. Every battle, every scar, every fallen comrade has made us stronger. This is not a history to fear. It is a promise. We do not break. We do not surrender. The alien crew leaned forward, their scales glistening under the dim lights. This was not the simple species they had expected, no. This was something far older and far more dangerous. The war they thought would end soon now seemed endless. Then came the most unsettling part. The screen flickered and shifted to a live feed human soldiers underground. Hidden deep within bunkers and tunnels, preparing weapons and gathering silently. The heat sensors on the Yulkari ships began to pick up strange patterns all over. The planet millions of small movements where none had expected. The humans were not hiding in fear. They were waiting, preparing. Alina's voice echoed again through the coms. You thought Earth was broken, silent, defeated. But silence is our shield. We have been ready all along. You face not just soldiers, but the spirit of every human who ever fought for this world. This war will not end with your victory. It will only begin. The Yulkari commander sat back, unsettled. The final broadcast was no surrender. It was a warning and a promise that no one would forget. The images on the alien screens did not stop. They showed centuries of human struggle, battles fought, with whatever was at hand: spears, swords, muskets, rifles, and later tanks and planes. The Yulkari commanders watched in silence as humans stood their ground again and again. Each battle was brutal and fierce, but no matter how many times the humans were pushed back, they rose again. The aliens saw families turning into warriors, entire cities burning but refusing to surrender, and soldiers fighting on, even when wounded or outnumbered. The footage was raw and honest, showing pain, loss, and relentless courage. One alien general whispered to another, "They have been at war longer than we have existed." The commander nodded, his eyes darkening. This was a species shaped by endless conflict, tested by fire and blood. The humans were not like the other worlds the Yulkari had conquered. They carried a history of fighting not for glory but for survival itself. Each image told a story of resistance, determination, and an unbreakable will. The human voice returned over the transmission, calm but strong. You may think we are weak now, but we are the sum of every battle ever fought on this soil. Cannot break us because we have never stopped fighting. Our history is not just in the past, it is the fire that burns inside every one of us. The alien crew looked at each other uneasily. Arrogance that had filled their hearts before now gave way to doubt. They were facing not just soldiers, but a force forged over thousands of years. A force that did not fear death or defeat. The images and sounds told them that humanity's spirit was something far beyond their understanding. Beneath the surface of the planet, in hidden bunkers and tunnels, humans moved silently, preparing for what was coming. Their numbers were greater than the aliens imagined. Heat signatures began to appear across the planet, millions of hidden warriors waiting to strike back. The war was not over. It was about to enter a new phase. Captain Alina Rhodes switched off one feed and prepared another. This was more than a warning, it was a promise. The Yulkari had underestimated Earth, and soon they would pay the price. As the broadcast continued, the Yulkari commanders felt a growing unease. The images no longer showed just old battles or distant history. Now the screens displayed something new: hidden human bases deep underground, vast networks of tunnels, and bunkers lit by flickering lights. Heat sensors aboard the alien ships began to pick up millions of small movements scattered across the planet's surface. These were not random. They were armies hidden from sight, waiting patiently for the right moment. Captain Alina Rhodes's voice came over the transmission, calm, but with a clear warning. You see now the truth behind our silence. We have not been broken. We have not surrendered. We've been waiting, watching, preparing. You face not just a few soldiers, but the strength of every human who ever fought to defend this world." Her words hung heavy in the air, each one carrying the weight of centuries of struggle and survival. The Yulkari officers exchanged worried glances. They had fought humans in open battle and paid dearly for every inch gained. But this was different. This was not an army that could be crushed with a single strike. This was a species that had learned to hide, to endure, and to strike back when the enemy least expected it. The silence that had puzzled them was a shield, and now it was a sign of the storm waiting to break. On board the alien flagship, the commander's voice was low but firm. "We must reconsider. This war will not end quickly or easily if we continue." His officers nodded in agreement. The arrogance that once filled their hearts was replaced by caution and respect for the human spirit. Deep beneath Earth's surface, Alina prepared to send the final part of her message. This was more than a broadcast, it was a declaration. The humans were ready to fight, not just for survival, but for victory. The war might have seemed lost to the invaders, but to the humans, it was far from over. The Yulkari High Command sat in uneasy silence as the final part of the broadcast filled their ship's systems. Captain Alina Rhodes's voice came through clearly, steady and unyielding. "You have seen what we are willing to endure and fight through. Know this, you are not facing just soldiers. You are facing all of humanity." The images showed millions of hidden warriors emerging from tunnels, their faces set with fierce determination. They were ready not just to survive, but to end the invaders' hopes of conquest once and for all. The alien commanders exchanged grim looks. The war they had expected to finish quickly now seemed endless and brutal. The humans' refusal to surrender and their readiness for total war shook the very core of their strategy. Slowly, the fleet began to withdraw from Earth's orbit. There would be no easy victory here. Back in the underground bunker, Alina switched off the transmitter. Her hands trembled not from fear, but from the weight of what she had done. War was not won with weapons alone. It was won with a message, a warning that echoed through the stars. Earth was not broken. Earth was not beaten. Earth was waiting. Outside, silence returned to the surface. But this time it was different. It was not the silence of defeat, but the calm before a storm that no enemy could ignore. The final broadcast from Earth had ended the war before it truly began, reminding the galaxy that humanity's fire could never be extinguished. Would you like help turning these parts into a full script for your YouTube channel with dialogue, narration cues, and pacing suggestions? The Yulkari fleet was retreating, but their commanders knew this was not the end. Earth had surprised them with a spirit no war machine could easily destroy. On the alien ships, debates flared. Some wanted to return with overwhelming force. Others feared a long war they could not win. Meanwhile, below the planet's surface, humans prepared quietly but fiercely. New weapons were built, alliances formed, and silent drills repeated in shadowed bunkers. Captain Alina Rhodes had become a symbol, not just a voice on a broadcast, but a leader of hope. Messages of unity and resistance spread among the survivors. Earth was no longer a lost world. It was a beacon of defiance. The war might have paused, but the real fight was just beginning. Months passed, and Earth's message echoed across the stars. Other alien civilizations watched closely, some with fear, others with curiosity. The Yulkari, once arrogant and confident, grew cautious, rethinking their strategies and their place in the galaxy. On Earth, humanity rebuilt quietly, but with purpose. The broadcast had done more than stop an invasion. It had changed the galaxy's view of humanity forever. Captain Alina Rhodes stood atop a hill overlooking a city slowly coming back to life. The silence had lifted, replaced by the hum of rebuilding and the determined voices of survivors. The message had been clear. Humanity would fight, survive, and thrive. The final broadcast was not just an end to a war, it was the beginning of a new chapter.